I always thought if something like this happened to me, if my wife, Emily, ever cheated, I'd know. That I'd feel it. People talk about instincts, about that gut deep awareness when something isn't right. A shift in body language, an unexplained absence, a crack in the foundation of trust. But I felt none of that. Not at first. The first message came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I was finishing up some reports at work. It was an ordinary day, nothing remarkable. My phone vibrated on my desk, a simple notification lighting up the screen. Unknown number, your wife is cheating on you. I remember snorting, shaking my head. Probably some scammer, some prank. I didn't even bother responding. Just deleted it, and went back to work. But the next day, another message came. Unknown number, she's lying to you. You should see for yourself. Again I ignored it. Emily and I had been married for 10 years. We weren't perfect, no couple was, but we were solid. We had built a life together, survived rough patches, made plans for the future. If something was wrong, I'd know. Wouldn't I? The third message came that night, just after Emily had kissed me on the cheek and left for book club. Unknown number, follow her. For a second, I actually considered it. Not because I thought it was true, but because the messages were starting to bother me. Some asshole had decided to mess with my life, and I wanted to put an end to it. Maybe it was one of Emily's friends playing a joke. Maybe some creep with nothing better to do. I almost left it alone. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. And so, against my better judgment, I grabbed my keys and followed my wife. She didn't go to book club. I knew the moment I saw her turn onto the highway that something was off. Her usual meetup was at a small cafe downtown. Instead, she drove past the exit, further and further away from the places she was supposed to be. I kept my distance, gripping the steering wheel too tightly, my pulse thudding in my ears. 15 minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot of a small hotel. Not a fancy one, not a sleazy one, just one of those forgettable places along the main road, the kind of place you'd pass without a second thought. She got out of the car, smoothed her hair, checked her phone. Then she walked inside. I sat there, frozen, staring at the empty driver's seat she had left behind. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted her to come back out in a minute, to have some ridiculous explanation. She didn't. Instead, a man arrived 5 minutes later. He parked 3 spaces down, barely looking around before striding toward the entrance. I barely got a look at his face. Tall. Dark hair. Confident. I watched him disappear inside. My hands shook. I could have left. Could have driven home, pretended I never saw anything. But I needed to be sure. I forced myself out of the car. My stomach twisted with nausea as I walked toward the hotel, my legs feeling numb beneath me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, burst in and confront them? Stand outside the door like a pathetic idiot? Turned out, I didn't have to decide. Because just as I reached the front doors, I caught a glimpse of them through the lobby window. Emily. Laughing. Tossing her hair. Reaching for his hand as they stepped into the elevator together. Something inside me cracked. My wife, was with another man, her fingers curling around his wrists like they belonged there. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't looked back. And that was when I knew. This wasn't some mistake. This wasn't an impulse. She had been doing this for a while. The weight of it hit me so hard I had to step back, away from the doors, away from the reality that had just shattered in front of me. I turned and walked to my car, my mind buzzing with static. She was cheating. Emily was cheating. And now I had to decide what to do about it. That night I didn't sleep. She came home late, slipping into bed beside me like nothing had happened. Her body was warm, her breathing even. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many nights she had done this. How many times she had kissed me after being with him. By morning I had a plan. I would get proof. Solid, undeniable proof. And then I would ruin her. I didn't want her apologies. I didn't want her explanations. I wanted her to lose everything. So I started preparing. I met with a divorce attorney. I copied financial records. I made sure our assets were protected. I didn't let on that I knew. For the next few days I played my part. Kissed her goodbye. Asked about her day. Smiled at the right moments. She had no idea what was coming. And then, just as I was about to set everything in motion, another message came. Unknown number, now you owe me. Or everyone will know what you did. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. This wasn't about Emily. This was about me. The messages hadn't been some cruel joke. They hadn't come from someone trying to help me. They had come from someone who knew. Someone who had been watching both of us. And now, they wanted something in return. Because while Emily's betrayal was real, I had my own secrets. Secrets that could destroy me. My phone felt heavier in my hands than it should have. I read the message again. Now you owe me. Or everyone will know what you did. My heart pounded against my ribs. I forced myself to breathe, to think rationally. Whoever this was, whoever had been watching Emily, wasn't after money. If they were, the demand would have been clear. No, this was different. This was personal. I deleted the text, but the words burned into my mind. What did they know? More importantly, who knew? I had spent years making sure my past stayed buried. I had done everything to keep it out of my new life. And now, in the middle of my wife's betrayal, it had resurfaced like a corpse that refused to stay in the ground. I barely registered Emily stirring beside me. She rolled over, draping an arm across my chest, her fingers brushing against my skin like she hadn't just spent the evening with another man. I stared at the ceiling. I needed to find out who was behind this. And I needed to do it before they ruined me. The next morning, I went about my routine like nothing had changed. Emily hummed as she made coffee, her phone never leaving her hand. She had a small, satisfied smile on her lips. Disgust curled in my stomach. I forced myself to eat, even though every bite tasted like nothing. She kissed my cheek before leaving for work, and I let her. Once she was gone, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the unknown number. I hesitated. If I responded, I'd be acknowledging them, showing them they had leverage. But ignoring them wasn't an option. My fingers hovered over the screen before finally typing a message. Me, what do you want? The response was immediate. Unknown number, meet me tonight. You know where. I frowned. What kind of cryptic bullshit was that? But then, something clicked. You know where. They weren't just taunting me. They were reminding me. And suddenly, I did know. I knew exactly where they wanted me to go. The Hollow. It wasn't the kind of place you found on accident. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found at all. A rundown bar on the outskirts of town, far enough away that most people didn't even know it existed. It had no sign, no advertising, just a door and a handful of regulars who minded their own business. And years ago, I had been one of them. I parked in the back lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to step back into the world I had left behind. But I had no choice. If someone had dug up my past, I needed to know how much they knew. And more importantly, I needed to know if they were going to use it against me. The inside was exactly as I remembered, dim, smoky, reeking of stale beer and bad decisions. A few men sat hunched over their drinks, barely glancing at me as I walked in. The bartender gave me a look of recognition but said nothing. I scanned the room, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Then I saw him. A man sitting in the corner booth, sipping a drink like he had all the time in the world. He was older than me, 40s, maybe 50s, grizzled, with sharp eyes that had seen too much. And he was smiling. Like he had won. I forced my feet to move. I slid into the booth across from him, keeping my expression neutral. You've been sending me messages. No point in pretending. His smile widened. Took you long enough. I studied him, searching for familiarity. He wasn't someone from my past. At least, not someone I recognized. "Who are you?" I asked. The man leaned back, swirling his drink. "That's not important." I clenched my jaw. "You said I owe you? What do you want?" His smile faded. "I need a favor." I frowned. "A favor?" He nodded. "Nothing crazy. Nothing violent. Just help." I didn't like the way he said that. "What kind of help?" I asked carefully. He took another sip before setting his glass down with deliberate slowness. "There's someone I need you to talk to. A man. He owes me something, and he's been ignoring me." A chill ran down my spine. I knew what he meant. "You want me to scare him?" I said. The man's smirk returned. "Smart guy." I swallowed down the unease clawing its way up my throat. "And if I say no?" His smile disappeared. "Then I make one phone call. And your real sins come to light." Silence stretched between us. I could hear the muffled sounds of bar chatter, the clinking of glasses, the hum of the jukebox in the corner. But none of it mattered. Because right now, in this dimly lit booth, my entire life hung in the balance. "Why me?" I finally asked. The man shrugged. "Because you're desperate. And because you already know what it's like to live with guilt." I clenched my jaw. He was right. I did know. I had been carrying it for years, pretending it didn't exist. Pretending I was just another normal guy, another husband, another man with nothing to hide. But the past never really goes away. It just waits. And tonight mine had caught up with me. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "If I do this," I said carefully, "it's over. You don't contact me again. You don't send more messages. You disappear." The man grinned. "Now we're talking." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I hesitated before picking it up. "A name. A location. Take care of it," the man said, standing up. "And I'll forget you exist." I watched him walk away, my fingers tightening around the note. I had come here thinking I would get answers. Thinking I would regain control of my life. Instead, I had just sold a piece of my soul. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I even had a choice. The paper felt heavy in my hands, though it was nothing more than a simple note, cheap, crumpled, the ink slightly smudged. But the weight of what it represented pressed down on me, suffocating. A name. A location. I unfolded it with numb fingers. Eric Langley. 241 Mill Street. The name meant nothing to me. The address? Vaguely familiar. Somewhere on the north side of town, near the old warehouses. An industrial district. Quiet. Empty after dark. I clenched my jaw, forcing my pulse to slow. The man from the bar, whoever the hell he was, had made it clear, I either handled this, or he dug up my past. And I couldn't let that happen. I stood from the booth, shoving the note into my pocket. The air in the hollow felt heavier than when I had walked in, as if it was clinging to me, soaking into my skin. I didn't belong here anymore. But maybe I never really left. I pushed through the door into the night air, inhaling deeply. The cold wind bit at my skin, grounding me, giving me something real to hold onto. Then I got into my car and started driving. 241 Mill Street was a warehouse. Not a rundown, abandoned one, at least, not entirely, but one that had clearly seen better days. The paint on the exterior had faded, and a single flickering light above the entrance barely kept the darkness at bay. A single black sedan was parked out front. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced with possibilities. Who was Eric Langley? What had he done to piss off the man from the bar? And what the hell was I supposed to do? I wasn't a thug. I wasn't some enforcer sent to collect debts. But I was a man with something to lose. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. My footsteps echoed against the pavement as I approached the entrance. The warehouse loomed above me, its dark windows like hollow eyes. I knocked once. Twice. Silence. Then movement. A moment later, the door cracked open, revealing a man in his late 40s. Wiry frame, graying hair, deep lines around his eyes. He looked exhausted. Paranoid. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice sharp, guarded. I hesitated. Say the wrong thing, and this whole situation spirals out of control. "Just someone who got dragged into something I don't want to be part of," I said. Langley's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I pulled the note from my pocket, holding it up between two fingers. "I was told to come find you. Thought maybe we should talk." Langley's face went pale. His grip on the doorframe tightened. Then he muttered, "Shit," and pulled me inside, locking the door behind us. The warehouse smelled like dust, motor oil, and something metallic. Rust, maybe? Or blood. I tried not to dwell on that. Langley paced in front of me, running a hand through his hair. His whole body was tense, like a man who knew the executioner's axe was about to fall. "Who sent you?" he asked. I debated lying but settled on the truth. "Some guy at the Hollow. Didn't give me a name. Just said I had a debt to pay, and you were part of it." Langley cursed under his breath, then sat down heavily on a stack of wooden crates. "He wants me dead, doesn't he?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He laughed bitterly. "Jesus Christ. I knew this was coming." Something cold curled in my stomach. I took a slow step closer. "Why? What did you do?" Langley rubbed his hands over his face. "Doesn't matter. If he sent you, I'm already screwed." I clenched my fists. "I don't even know what this is about. I didn't agree to kill you." Langley's eyes snapped to mine. "But will you?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Would I? If it meant keeping my secret buried? If it meant making this whole problem disappear? Langley must have seen something in my face because he let out another hollow laugh. "Yeah. That's what I thought." I exhaled sharply. "There has to be another way out of this." He shook his head. "No. The kind of people you're dealing with? They don't let things go. Trust me, I know." I wanted to ask how he knew. What he had done to get himself on the wrong side of this man. But it didn't matter. I wasn't here to understand. I was here to choose. Langley must have realized the same thing because he slowly stood, nodding to himself. His expression shifted, not angry, not afraid. Resigned. "Look," he said. "If you don't do it, someone else will. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. But it'll happen." I swallowed hard. He was right. The man from the Hollow didn't strike me as someone who handed out empty threats. If I walked away now, Langley would still die. The only difference was whether I would be the one to do it, or if I would be the one paying the price instead. Langley sighed. "Get it over with." I shook my head. "Jesus, man. I..." A loud crack split the air. Langley jerked. Blood bloomed across his chest. For a second, either of us moved. Then he collapsed. I spun around, hard hammering, just in time to see a figure retreat into the shadows, a gun glinting in the dim light. A second later, the warehouse door swung open, then slammed shut. Silence. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I dropped to my knees, pressing my hands against Langley's wound, but it was useless. His body was already limp. His eyes stared at the ceiling, empty. He was gone. And just like that, my decision had been made for me. But the worst part? Whoever pulled that trigger had been waiting. Watching. They had wanted me to be here when it happened. A message. I wasn't off the hook. I was deeper in than ever before. And now, there was no way out. Langley's body was still warm. The blood spread in a slow, creeping pool beneath him, dark and thick. My hands were slick with it, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The echo of the gunshot still rang in my ears, even though the shooter was long gone. I had been ready to walk away. And now, that choice had been ripped from me. I wiped my hands on my jacket, smearing red across the fabric. My fingers trembled as I fumbled for my phone, my brain still struggling to catch up with what had just happened. I needed to think. I needed to move. But first, I needed to get the hell out of here. I drove without a destination, my mind spinning in circles. The warehouse. The shooter. The body left behind. It wasn't supposed to go like this. I had been given a job. Scare him. Make sure he understood the stakes. That was it. I wasn't supposed to watch a man die. I wasn't supposed to be part of a murder. A sharp buzz jolted me from my thoughts. My phone vibrated on the passenger seat, the screen lighting up with a single, familiar message. Unknown number, now we're even. I slammed the brakes, the car skidding slightly before stopping on the side of the road. My chest felt tight, my vision narrowing. Even. Like this had been a transaction. A business deal. I clenched my jaw, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I should have known. The man from the hollow never intended for me to handle Langley myself. He had just wanted me there, a witness to the execution. A message clear as day. They could have killed me instead. And they still might. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, debating whether to respond. To demand answers. To tell them to go to hell. But what good would that do? This wasn't a negotiation. It was a noose tightening around my neck. I shoved the phone into my pocket and forced myself to keep driving. By the time I got home, it was late. Too late. Emily was already in bed, her side of the room illuminated by the glow of her phone's screen. I stood in the doorway, watching her. She didn't even look up. She had no idea what had happened tonight. That I had spent the last few hours washing blood from my hands. That my clothes, now tucked away in a trash bag in the garage, had been soaked in another man's life. I wondered how many nights she had come home from him, kissed me, and climbed into bed like nothing had changed. I wondered if she ever felt even a fraction of the guilt I felt now. She glanced at me then, eyes flicking up from her screen. "You're home late." I swallowed down the bitterness rising in my throat. "Yeah. Got caught up at work." She nodded absently, already turning back to whatever meaningless conversation she was having. Probably with him. I didn't care anymore. I had bigger problems. I stripped off my shirt, tossing it into the laundry bin, and crawled into bed beside her. She smelled like vanilla. Like home. Like a life that no longer belonged to me. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. All I saw was Langley. The next morning, the news broke. A man was found dead late last night in an abandoned warehouse on Mill Street. Police have not released his identity, but sources say the victim had ties to underground criminal activity. I stared at the TV, my stomach twisting. Langley was a ghost now. A name in a news cycle that people would forget by the end of the week. But I wouldn't. I felt Emily's eyes on me as I turned off the screen. "You okay?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." She hesitated, as if debating whether to push. Then her phone buzzed, and just like that, she was gone again. I clenched my fists. I had spent days planning my revenge, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy her. Now I wasn't sure if I cared anymore. My own life was unraveling too fast. And whoever was pulling the strings wasn't finished with me yet. By noon, I was back in my car, driving without a real plan. I needed answers. So I went back to the Hollow. The bartender barely glanced at me as I walked in. The dim lighting felt suffocating now, pressing down on me like a physical weight. I scanned the room. The man from before wasn't there. But someone else was. A woman. Sitting alone at a booth, nursing a drink, her fingers drumming against the glass. Blonde hair, sharp eyes, dressed in dark, fitted clothes that screamed professional. She was waiting for me. I took a slow breath and walked over. She looked up as I slid into the seat across from her. "About time," she murmured. I didn't respond. Just stared at her, waiting. She smirked. "Relax, Noah. I'm not here to kill you. Her voice was smooth, confident. Dangerous. I folded my arms. Then why are you here? She took a sip of her drink before setting it down, her eyes locked onto mine. To make sure you understand something. I didn't blink. And what's that? She leaned forward, voice lowering. You're in this now. Whether you like it or not. My jaw clenched. I didn't ask for this. She laughed softly. Neither did Langley. And look how that turned out. I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. You're angry. That's good. You'll need that. I narrowed my eyes. For what? She slid something across the table. A folder. Thick. Full of papers. Because Langley was just the beginning, she said. I hesitated before picking it up. Flipping it open. My stomach dropped. Inside, there were photos. Names. Details. And at the very bottom, clipped to the last page. A picture of me. I stared at it, the reality slamming into me like a freight train. They had been watching me for a long time. This wasn't about repaying a debt anymore. This was about control. And I had just stepped into something I might never escape. The folder sat in front of me like a ticking bomb. I flipped through the pages, my breath slow and controlled, even as my pulse hammered in my ears. Photos of people I didn't recognize. Notes, addresses, details about their lives, their routines. Then, at the very bottom, clipped neatly to the last page. A picture of me. Not just any picture. A surveillance shot. Taken from a distance. I was walking into my office, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, completely unaware. They had been watching me. For a long time. I set the folder down carefully and looked up at the woman across from me. She smirked. Figured that would get your attention. I clenched my jaw. Who the hell are you? She leaned back against the booth, taking a slow sip of her drink before answering. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you're in this now. I exhaled sharply. I didn't sign up for any of this. She tilted her head slightly, amused. You really think that matters? I stayed silent, my fingers tightening around the folder. She sighed, setting her drink down. Here's how this works, Noah. You did your part. You showed up for Langley. You played your role. And now you have a choice. I scoffed. Somehow I doubt that. Her smirk widened. Smart man. I leaned forward, my voice lowering. What do you want from me? She tapped a manicured nail against the folder. It's simple. You do what we say, when we say it. No questions. No hesitation. I swallowed down the growing knot in my throat. And if I don't? Her smile faded. Then everything in that folder, the people in those pictures? They become your responsibility. You say no, and their blood is on your hands. Just like Langley's. I stiffened. I didn't kill him. She arched an eyebrow. Didn't you? I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. She had a point. I hadn't pulled the trigger. But I had been there. And whoever had orchestrated it wanted me to carry the guilt. I closed the folder. What's the next job? Her smirk returned, satisfied. She reached into her jacket, pulled out a small envelope, and slid it across the table. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside you'll find everything you need, she said smoothly. A name. A location. You'll handle it tomorrow night. I exhaled slowly. Handle it how? She shrugged. That's up to you. Just make sure they understand who they're dealing with. My stomach twisted. This wasn't going to stop. Not unless I found a way out. But for now, I had no choice. I shoved the envelope into my pocket and stood. I'll do it. She smiled. Knew you would. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Oh, and Noah? I looked back. Her expression had changed. Less amusement, more something else. Something darker. Stay away from your wife. My pulse skipped. She knew about Emily. Of course she did. They had been watching me for a long time. I forced a cold smile. That won't be a problem. Then I walked out, gripping the envelope so hard my fingers ached. Emily was asleep when I got home. Good. I wasn't sure I could look at her right now, not with everything boiling inside me. I moved through the house silently, stepping into my office and locking the door behind me. Only then did I pull out the envelope. I opened it with steady hands, even though my chest felt tight. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Target, Victor Carmine. Location, Harborview Motel. Room 207. Time, 9 p.m. I stared at the name. It wasn't familiar. But that didn't matter. I was supposed to go there tomorrow night. To do something. And whether I wanted to or not, I had just agreed. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand over my face. I needed to think. I needed a way out. Because if I didn't find one soon, I wasn't going to come back from this. The next day felt surreal. I went to work, sat through meetings, made polite conversation with people who had no idea the kind of world I had been dragged into. Emily texted me twice. Morning. Hope you have a good day. Then, a few hours later. Don't forget, we have dinner with Megan and Tom this weekend. I stared at the messages, my jaw tightening. She was still playing her role. Just like I was playing mine. I didn't respond. Instead, I left work early. I drove across town, parking 2 blocks away from the Harborview Motel. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I needed to see. I needed to know who Victor Carmine was before I walked into this blindly. The motel was rundown, the kind of place where people disappeared. I sat in my car watching. At 8:45, a man stepped out of room 207. Mid-40s. Expensive suit. Slick back hair. He looked like he belonged in an office, not a place like this. He pulled out his phone, speaking into it with a frown. I couldn't hear what he was saying. But I didn't have to. Because a second later, a black car pulled up beside him. 2 men got out. Victor's face paled. I tensed. This wasn't a meeting. This was something else. One of the men reached into his jacket. Shit. I was supposed to be the one delivering a message. But someone else had just beat me to it. Victor turned to run. Too late. A gunshot cracked the night. Victor staggered, then collapsed against the motel wall. The 2 men didn't even hesitate. They got back into their car and peeled away, disappearing down the street. I stayed frozen, gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't a job. It was a setup. I was supposed to be here. To see this. And now, just like Langley, Victor Carmine was dead. I wasn't getting out. Not now. Not ever. The body slumped against the motel wall, blood pooling at Victor Carmine's feet. The 2 men who had shot him were already gone, their car vanishing down the street like a ghost. No hesitation. No panic. Just business. And me? I sat frozen in my car, watching a man die. I had come here expecting to be the one delivering the message. To be the one standing outside room 207, trying to scare a man into submission. But now, it was clear, I had never been meant to confront Victor. I had been meant to witness this. To understand that I was nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. My stomach twisted. I needed to leave. I turned the key in the ignition, my hands slick with sweat. But just as the engine roared to life, my phone vibrated on the passenger seat. I didn't want to look. I already knew who it was. But I reached for it anyway, my fingers tightening around the device as I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Timing is everything, isn't it? A shiver ran down my spine. I stared at the message, my pulse hammering. My gaze flickered back to Victor Carmine's body. He wasn't moving. I had to get out of here. I threw the car into drive, pulling away from the curb, keeping my speed steady even though my heart was racing. My fingers gripped the wheels so hard they ached. I was being watched. Even now, as I drove through the darkened streets, someone had their eyes on me. I checked the mirrors. No obvious tails. No strange cars lurking in the distance. But I knew better than to think I was alone. Whoever these people were, they were always a step ahead. And now, they had made one thing painfully clear. I wasn't in control. I never had been. By the time I got home, the nausea had settled deep in my gut. Emily was in the living room, curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her brows knitting together. "You're late," she said. I swallowed hard. "Got caught up at work." She studied me for a second, then shrugged, returning her attention to her screen. She didn't care. Not really. Maybe once, she would have questioned me. Maybe she would have pushed, would have noticed the tension in my shoulders, the way my hands trembled slightly at my sides. But now, she was too busy lying to me to notice I was lying to her, too. I moved past her, heading for the bathroom. I turned on the sink, splashing cold water on my face, trying to steady my breathing. I had to figure this out. Because if I didn't, I was next. The next morning, the news broke. A man was found dead last night outside the Harborview Motel. Authorities are investigating possible gang-related activity. There was a picture of the scene. A grainy, zoomed-in shot of Victor Carmine's body against the motel wall. My chest tightened. They had killed him. And I had been there. Another buzz from my phone. Another message. Unknown number. Still think you're in control? I clenched my jaw. I was done playing their game. I didn't reply. Instead, I got in my car and started driving. I went back to the Hollow. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe I thought the woman from before would be there, waiting for me, another smug smile on her lips. But the booth where she had sat was empty. I scanned the room, my pulse hammering. The bartender glanced at me but said nothing. I walked up to the counter. "The woman who was here a few nights ago," I said, my voice low. "Where is she?" The bartender shrugged. "Haven't seen her since." I exhaled slowly. "And the guy before her?" "Buddy, people come and go here. If you're looking for answers, you're in the wrong place." I clenched my fists. They had vanished. Like ghosts. I had no names, no leads, just a phone number that only texted when they wanted to. I was trapped in a game where I didn't know the rules. And I was running out of time. That night, another message came. "Unknown number, meet me. Same place. 11 p.m. I stared at the screen. My pulse pounded, my instincts screaming at me to walk away. But I couldn't. I was in too deep now. So I got in my car and drove back to the Hollow. The bar was quieter this time. Fewer people. And in the same booth, waiting for me, was her. The blonde woman. She watched me as I approached, that same knowing smirk playing on her lips. "You're predictable," she murmured as I slid into the seat across from her. I ignored the jab. "What the hell was last night?" She arched an eyebrow. "A demonstration." I clenched my jaw. "He was already dead when I got there." "Exactly." She leaned forward, voice dropping lower. "That's the point, Noah. You need to understand something. You don't make decisions here. We do." I gritted my teeth. "You killed him. Then you sent me there to watch." She tilted her head. "No. We sent you there to see." "See what?" I snapped. Her eyes darkened. "That you don't get to walk away from this." A heavy silence stretched between us. Then, she slid another envelope across the table. I didn't pick it up. She smirked. "Go on." My fingers hovered over it before I finally grabbed it, pulling out the paper inside. A name. A location. Same as before. But this time, I felt sick before I even read it. I forced my eyes downward. And then my entire body went cold. Because staring back at me was a name I knew too well. Emily Carter. My wife. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. My heart pounded against my ribs. I looked up, my voice hoarse. "What is this?" The woman's smile widened. "Your final test. I gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in my fist. They had taken everything from me. My control. My choices. My life. And now, they were giving me one last order. Kill my cheating wife. Or die instead. The paper in my hand felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. Emily's name. Her location. A death sentence. I forced myself to breathe, but the air in the hollow felt thick, suffocating. Across from me, the blonde woman watched with mild amusement, like she had been waiting for this moment. Like she already knew how I would react. "You're out of your mind," I said, my voice tight. She raised an eyebrow. "Am I?" I clenched my jaw. "Why her?" She shrugged. "Why not?" My pulse pounded against my skull. "She has nothing to do with this." The woman smirked. "She has everything to do with this, Noah." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dipping lower. "Think about it. You've been holding on to this anger, this hatred, ever since you found out, haven't you? The betrayal. The lies. The way she comes home smelling like another man and pretends nothing's wrong." I swallowed hard, my hands tightening into fists. "She deserves this," the woman continued, her voice smooth, coaxing. "You want this. We're just giving you permission." A shiver ran down my spine. That was the worst part. They knew me. They had been watching me long enough to know exactly which buttons to press, which thoughts to plant in my head. And for a brief, horrifying second, I considered it. I pictured it. Emily, caught in the act, her perfect little world crumbling around her as she realized I had finally done something about it. An eye for an eye. A betrayal for a betrayal. My stomach twisted. No. This wasn't justice. This wasn't about revenge. This was them controlling me again. I forced myself to meet the woman's gaze. "I'm not killing my wife." She exhaled slowly, as if disappointed. "That's a shame." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a phone. My phone. The blood drained from my face as she placed it on the table, screen facing up. It was unlocked, the messages open. Texts. Photos. Conversations I had deleted long ago. Proof. Of what I had done. Of what I had been trying to keep buried all these years. She tapped the screen once, and a text message popped up, ready to send. To the police. To everyone. "You do this," she said, her voice eerily calm, "and your secret dies with her." I stared at the screen, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. She was serious. If I refused, my past would be exposed. Everything I had worked to bury would be dragged into the light. I would lose everything. And Emily? She would still be alive. Still be with him. I gritted my teeth. "You don't think I see what you're doing?" The woman smiled. "Of course you do. But knowing doesn't change your choices." I looked down at the paper again. Emily's name. The location. A time. Tomorrow night. I had until then to decide. I clenched my jaw, shoving the paper into my pocket. Without another word, I grabbed my phone and stood. She didn't try to stop me. Because she knew. No matter what I told myself, I would make a decision. And it would cost me everything. I drove aimlessly for an hour, the paper burning in my pocket like a brand. Kill Emily, and my secret stays buried. Spare her, and they destroy me instead. It was a choice with no escape. I thought about going to the police, about confessing everything. But what would I even say? That some faceless organization had blackmailed me into witnessing murders? That I was supposed to be their executioner? And even if I did go to the cops, that wouldn't erase my past. It wouldn't undo what I had done years ago. They still had the proof. They could still ruin me. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I needed time. But time was the one thing I didn't have. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. Emily was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, staring at her. For years I had loved this woman. Built a life with her. And now, I didn't know who she was anymore. Or maybe she had always been this way, and I had just been too blind to see it. I moved closer, standing by the bed. She looked peaceful. Innocent. A lie. She stirred slightly, mumbling in her sleep, rolling onto her side. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up. A new message. Miss you already? Can't wait for next time. My grip tightened around the phone. I closed my eyes, forcing down the rage bubbling beneath the surface. They had chosen her because they knew I wanted revenge. They wanted me to want this. And that terrified me. Because part of me did. I placed the phone back down carefully, then turned and walked out of the room, my heart hammering. I needed to think. Because tomorrow night, I would have to make a choice. Kill my wife. Or let my past kill me. Time was running out. By this time tomorrow, my decision would be made, whether I wanted it to be or not. Kill Emily, and I walk away clean. My secret buried forever. Spare her, and they destroy me instead. There was no third option. I sat in my office, staring at the paper with her name on it. The ink blurred as my mind raced through possibilities, desperate for an escape. But no matter how many ways I looked at it, every road led to the same place. If I didn't kill Emily, they would make sure I went down instead. They would expose my past. And if that happened, everything, my life, my future, would be over. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I had spent years pretending to be someone else. A good husband. A man with a normal life. But now, the truth was catching up to me. And I wasn't sure if I had the strength to outrun it anymore. The next evening, I left the house at 8:30 p.m. Emily barely noticed. She was on the phone when I told her I was heading out, her voice light and playful, like she was talking to a friend. But I knew better. I had seen the messages. I had followed her to that damn hotel. She didn't love me anymore. Maybe she never had. I walked out without saying goodbye. Not that it mattered. By the end of the night, one of us wasn't coming back. I drove aimlessly for a while, my hands gripping the wheel. I had to be sure. Had to commit. But something kept pulling me back. The thought of standing over Emily. Looking her in the eyes. Watching the realization dawn on her face as she understood what was happening. Could I do it? Could I really kill her? I pulled into an empty parking lot, resting my head against the steering wheel. I wasn't a good man. I never had been. But was I a killer? My phone buzzed. I hesitated before looking. Unknown number, it's time. A cold shiver ran down my spine. They were watching. They were waiting. And they expected me to finish what they started. I exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel tighter. I had made my decision. At exactly 9 p.m., I walked into the house. Emily was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She looked up as I entered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're home early," she said, taking a sip. I stepped closer, my heartbeat steady. "Yeah." She tilted her head, studying me. "You okay?" I nodded. Then I pulled out the gun. Her breath hitched. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Wine splattered across the tile, deep red against white. She took a step back, her hands trembling. "Noah, what are you doing?" I stared at her, my grip tightening on the gun. This was it. This was the moment. She had betrayed me. Lied to me. Walked into another man's arms like I was nothing. And now, I had the chance to make her pay. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her eyes darting toward the door, calculating her escape. But there was none. She was trapped. Just like I was. I took a deep breath. Then I lowered the gun. Emily blinked. What? I tossed the gun onto the counter. The clatter echoed through the room. Her eyes flickered between me and the weapon, confusion twisting across her face. "I'm not doing it," I said, my voice steady. She swallowed hard. "Noah, Save it," I snapped. She flinched. Silence stretched between us. Then my phone buzzed again. I didn't have to look. I already knew what it said. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. They're going to come for me now, I murmured. Emily's brows furrowed. What are you talking about? Who's coming for you? I laughed bitterly. You don't get to ask that. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I turned away. I need you to leave. She hesitated. Noah, I don't. I spun back around, my eyes burning. Get out, Emily. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands and moved toward the door. She paused once, glancing back at me. Where are you going? She asked softly. I didn't answer. She swallowed hard, then walked out. I listened as her car started, the engine fading into the night. I was alone. And I wouldn't be alone for long. I sat on the couch, staring at the gun on the counter. I had made my choice. And I knew what came next. Another buzz from my phone. This time I looked. Unknown number, wrong choice. A shadow moved outside. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes. I wasn't getting out of this alive. And maybe that was the price of freedom. The front door creaked open. And then everything went black.